So welcome to this week's video blog. It will be a shorter one this week because, as you may have heard on the from the government briefing on Thursday, where Boris Johnson reported that they felt the peak of the virus was over, or at least the first peak was over. It's also felt a little calmer across the organisation this week, so not without its challenges. And people are continuing to have to work incredibly hard to keep things stable, but it has felt considerably calmer. So there's just a few updates to share with you. So firstly, as with the Easter weekend, primary care is being asked to remain open on the 2 May bank holidays. So the first one coming up is actually on the Friday, the 8th of May. So we've been liaising with each of the CCGs that we operate within to ensure that we're clear about what level of primary care provision will be provided. Each of those areas are dealing with things slightly differently, but it does appear as though there will be a slightly reduced level of primary care provision across CCG areas. So even when GP practices are opening, they may well be opening on skeleton staff, and in some cases clusters of GP practices within primary care networks are looking at how they can provide services collaboratively. So with that in mind, we're trying to dovetail those plans with our provision for both those bank holiday days, and we'll be in touch with staff and be able to clarify operationally those rotas and any changes to shifts that we might need to put in place. So second update for me today is just some news on PPE. So I'm pleased to say that as a consequence of relentless amounts of hard work from members of the team here at New Century House, and also the generosity of manufacturers and providers outside the organisation, and some really great contacts that we've had made with us via members of staff. We're feeling in a much better place with regards to PPE. So that's good news. On the flip side, I just wanted to share a bit of downbeat update really. So as you'll know from listening to video blogs and reading e-bulletins and talking to colleagues here, that a huge amount of work's gone on over the last 5 or 6 weeks to try to source a supply of a whole range of protective equipment and other provisions to ensure that people are able to work safely in all our settings, so in GP practices, our treatment centres, on home visits, and here at New Century House. And those deliveries arrive at New Century House day and night. So if they arrive during the out of hours period, obviously they don't get stored away securely until the following morning. And there's been a few instances recently where when the team have come to store away some of the provisions that have been delivered overnight, and that they've been opened and things taken. So obviously that's a concern. I think the most recent example was some large containers of hand sanitizer that were delivered in the out of hours period, and a box was opened and 2 containers taken. So apart from the fact that it's company property, actually more importantly is that those are there in order for us to be able to distribute, to ensure that staff, colleagues are feel safe and are protected. So if people have got any concerns about their own personal safety and personal well-being, you might be tempted to take things for personal use. Firstly, please don't, and secondly, talk to a supervisor or manager who I know would be happy to see what can be done to ensure that you feel safe at home. So the final update from me today is on testing. So you'll be aware from reading and listening to the national news that the capacity for testing has been ramped up significantly across the country recently in order to reach the government's target of 100,000 tests being carried out per day by the end of April. So there are 2 testing centres that have opened up in our patches, one at the Etihad in the middle of Manchester, and a second one at Ashton Primary Care Centre, which we're involved in delivering ourselves. Alongside the opening up of more capacity has been the ability for people to make those appointments themselves online, so book themselves appointments. So if you are in that category and you do need to book an appointment for yourself, it'd be really helpful if you could still let the HR team know that that's the case, and also what the results of those tests are when they come back, just to enable us to keep on top of our staff and know who's positive, who's not positive, and what people's status is when they're self-isolating. So as before, the email address is gtd.hrstaff@nhs.net. And then a second point on testing is if you are in a position where you need to go for a test, some of these newer test facilities that have opened up are undertaking self-swabbing. So essentially you're given a kit to self-swab. Now we know from the evidence that self-swabbing tends to have a higher rate of false negative results. So people who don't swab themselves as thoroughly as they would from a healthcare professional may well have a higher likelihood of getting a negative test result because the swab hasn't been taken, or the swab sample hasn't been taken properly. So if you are due to go for a test, I would urge you to speak to one of the clinical colleagues in the organisation, so whether that be an HCA, a practice nurse, maybe one of our doctors, just to get some advice on how to effectively take your swab sample, and that will increase the likelihood of your results being as accurate as possible. So that's it from this week. As ever, thank you for all your efforts. Please do take care, look after your families, and tune in again next week.